Martinez Rodrigo, could end a man's bloodline with 3 words into a phone, but he couldn't make his sons hear his voice. For 6 years, the twins lived in a tomb of silence, while their father burned through fortunes, threatened world-class surgeons, and made specialists disappear when they delivered the same merciless verdict: congenital, permanent, they will never hear, until a maid from a fishing village noticed something no elite doctor had seen. Something small, something wrong, and what she pulled from those tiny ears would detonate the entire Rodrigo empire from within. Before we continue, where are you watching this from, and what time is it there right now? Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next chapter. The marble floor of the Rodrigo estate swallowed sound like a grave. Martinez stood in his study 6'4", sharp-jawed, with eyes that could freeze blood, watching through bulletproof glass as his enforcer dragged a hooded man across the courtyard. The traitor's muffled sobs barely registered. Martinez had heard that song 100 times before. He lifted his phone. 2 words. Bury him. The man's pleading stopped. But then a different sound shattered the cold. Screaming. High. Panicked. Familiar. Martinez's chest locked. He crossed the hall in 4 strides, his polished shoes echoing like gunshots. The guards at the nursery door stepped aside without a word. They knew better than to delay him when his sons were involved. Inside, Thiago and Mateo, 6 years old, identical, fragile, were clutching their heads, tears streaming, mouths open in silent agony. They couldn't scream with words. They didn't know words. They had never heard words. They only knew pain. "Get the doctor," Martinez snapped at the nearest guard. His voice was steel wrapped in gasoline. Now. But even as he knelt beside them, smoothing Thiago's sweat-soaked hair, Martinez already knew the truth. The doctor wouldn't help. No one ever did. 6 years ago, his wife died, bringing these boys into the world. She bled out on the delivery table while Martinez stood frozen in the hallway, soaked in her blood, holding 2 silent newborns who never cried. The doctors said it first. They don't respond to sound. Then the specialists. Bilateral sensorineural deafness. Congenital. Then the surgeons flown in from Switzerland, Japan, Boston, all said the same damn thing. There is no cure. You need to accept this. Martinez Rodrigo did not accept things. He paid millions. He bribed hospital boards. He once kidnapped an audiologist and locked him in a villa for 3 weeks, desperate for an answer that never came. But the twins never reacted, never turned toward sound, never heard their father say their names. The mansion became a mausoleum. Silent, heavy, hollow. To the underworld, Martinez was a legend, a man who could topple cartels, corrupt governments, and orchestrate assassinations with surgical precision. To his sons, he was a ghost they could see, but never hear. Rosa arrived 3 months ago. She was nobody. A replacement maid from some forgotten coastal village, hired after the last nanny quit without explanation, something about feeling watched and hearing things in the walls. Rosa was soft-spoken, small, unremarkable, the kind of woman you'd pass in a market and forget instantly, but the twins didn't forget her. Within days, Thiago and Mateo began following her everywhere. They tugged her apron. They watched her hands. They leaned into her touch in a way they never did with doctors or guards. She didn't bark orders. She didn't force them into uncomfortable tests. She just saw them. And one morning, while gently combing Thiago's dark curls near the sunlit window, Rosa froze. Her fingers had brushed the curve of his ear, and deep inside the canal, hidden in shadow where no one had thought to look, she saw something. Something that shouldn't be there. It wasn't wax. It wasn't natural. It was dark, solid, and when the light hit it just right, it moved. Rosa's breath caught. She tilted Thiago's head, squinting into the tiny passage, her pulse spiking. Then she checked Mateo. Same ear, same shadow, same wrongness. Her hands began to tremble, not from fear, but from the terrible, impossible realization creeping up her spine. These boys weren't born deaf. Someone made them that way. Rosa's hands were still shaking when she checked Mateo's ear. She tilted his small head toward the afternoon light, her heart hammering against her ribs as she peered into the canal. There, the same unnatural shadow. The same dense, dark mass lodged deep, where no mother, no nurse, no surgeon should have missed it. But they had missed it. Or worse, they'd ignored it. Rosa's mind raced back to her village, To the old fisherman who'd gone deaf after a rival stuffed his ears with poisoned clay during a drunken fight. The doctors had called it infection until Rosa's grandmother extracted the foreign mass with heated oil and a carved bone tool. Unnatural obstructions left a specific shadow, dense, compact, deliberate. This wasn't a tumor. This wasn't wax. This was placed. Rosa found the nearest guard, a brick-shouldered man named Cisco, standing outside the nursery. "I need to speak to Señor Rodrigo," she said, her voice steady despite the panic clawing at her throat. "It's about the boys. It's urgent." Cisco didn't even look at her. "He's in a meeting. This can't wait." "He's in a meeting." The guard's tone was final, dismissive. "And I don't take orders from maids." Rosa's jaw tightened. She turned toward the east wing, where the mansion doctor kept his office, a silver-haired man named Dr. Vega who treated the Rodrigo family like a luxury retainer. She knocked. Entered without waiting. Dr. Vega looked up from his desk, annoyance flashing across his face. "What is it?" "The twins," Rosa said quickly. "There's something in their ears. A blockage. I think." "You think?" Vega's laugh was sharp and cold. "You're a maid, Rosa. An illiterate woman from some backward village. You think you know more than the specialists who've examined those boys for 6 years? I'm telling you, I saw." "What you saw," Vega interrupted, standing, "was shadow, ear canal curvature, your imagination." He waved her off like smoke. "Don't waste my time with superstitions." Rosa stood frozen in the doorway, rage and helplessness burning in her chest. They won't listen. No one will listen. She returned to the nursery, where Tiago and Mateo sat on the floor, stacking wooden blocks in silence. She knelt between them, her voice a whisper only she could hear. "I will protect you, whatever it costs," because the mass in their ears wasn't random. It was surgical, calculated, hidden. Someone had stolen their hearing, and someone in this house had helped. Then Tiago gasped. His small hands flew to his ears, his face twisting in sudden, brutal agony. He collapsed, convulsing, screaming without sound. Mateo collapsed 3 seconds after his brother. Both twins writhed on the nursery floor, tiny hands clawing at their ears, mouths open in silent, guttural screams that tore through Rosa like knives. Blood. A thin crimson line trickling from Tiago's left ear. "No, no, no." Rosa lunged for the door, yanking it open. "Cisco, please, get Señor Rodrigo, the boys are bleeding." The guard's face remained stone. "He's interrogating a traitor. No interruptions." "They're dying?" "Then get the doctor." "Dr. Vega won't come. He thinks I'm—" Her voice cracked. "Please, please, just tell him." Cisco stepped forward, his shadow swallowing hers. "Go back inside, Maid, before you lose more than your job." The door slammed in her face. Rosa spun back toward the twins, her vision blurring with fury and terror. The former nanny, the woman who quit without explanation, who left in the dead of night 3 months ago, her face pale, her hands shaking. "I can't watch them suffer anymore," she'd whispered to the cook. "I can't be here when it happens." Rosa had thought she meant the deafness. Now she understood. The nanny had known what was inside their ears, known it would get worse. And she'd run. Mateo convulsed harder, his small body arching off the floor. Tiago's ear was bleeding steadily now, soaking into his collar. The masses were shifting, expanding, killing them. Rosa's breath came fast and shallow. No guards, no doctor, no Martinez, only her. She whispered the words her grandmother had spoken over the fisherman's body 20 years ago. "A mother is the one who steps in when everyone else steps back." Rosa moved like a woman possessed. She tore through the nursery drawers, finding the first aid kit, grabbed a pair of surgical tweezers, thin, steel, sharp, sprinted to the kitchenette down the hall, set a pot of water to boil on the hot plate, dropped the tweezers in, counted to 60. Her hands didn't shake anymore. Fear had burned away into something colder, sharper. Focus. She returned to the nursery, knelt beside Tiago. He was the worst, blood now pooling in the hollow of his ear. "I'm sorry, mi niño," she whispered, even though he couldn't hear. "I'm so sorry." She tilted his head into the light, steadied the tweezers, and slowly, so slowly guided the steel tips into the dark canal. The metal scraped against something solid. Not bone, not flesh, something dense, foreign. She adjusted her angle, applied the gentlest pressure, and the mass twitched. Like it was alive. Rosa's stomach lurched, but she didn't pull back. She couldn't pull back, because whatever was inside Tiago's ear wasn't just blocking sound, it was burrowing deeper. Rosa's world narrowed to three things: the tweezers, the blood, and the thing trying to dig deeper into Tiago's skull. She could feel it resisting a sick, fibrous tension against the steel. Not organic. The thought should have paralyzed her. Instead, it sharpened her focus into something surgical, primal. She angled the tweezers fractionally left, found purchase beneath the mass, and pulled. Slowly, steadily, the resistance grew. Tiago's body went rigid, his mouth locked in a soundless scream. Then release. The mass slid free. Rosa yanked it out in one fluid motion and dropped it onto a white cloth beside her. For 3 seconds, the world held its breath. The object was wrong in every way. Thick, compact, roughly the size of a grape but harder, denser like clay mixed with resin. Tiny fibers protruded from its surface, black and thread-like, as if it had been rooted inside the ear canal. And the smell. Chemical, acidic, the kind of scent that came from laboratories, not bodies. Rosa stared at it, bile rising in her throat. This was made. This was placed. On purpose. Tiago went completely still. His eyes were open but unfocused, his chest frozen mid-breath. Rosa's heart seized. No, Tiago, breathe, por favor. Then his eyes snapped into focus. Wide, shocked, alive. His head turned slowly, instinctively toward the far wall, toward the antique clock, the one that had ticked in that room for 6 years, the one he had never reacted to. Tick, tick, tick. Tiago's lips parted. His breath came in a sharp, trembling gasp. He heard it. His small hand reached toward the sound, fingers trembling, tears spilling down his flushed cheeks, and then quietly, like a prayer he didn't know he could speak, he whispered, "What is..." The words were broken, unpracticed, impossible. Rosa's vision blurred. She pressed a hand over her mouth, silent sobs shaking her shoulders as she watched the boy hear the world for the first time. 6 years of silence. Shattered. She didn't celebrate. She turned immediately to Matteo, still convulsing, still bleeding. One more. Just one more. The mansion's front doors exploded open, heavy boots on marble. Shouting. The metallic click of safeties being released. Martinez Rodrigo stormed into the entry hall like a hurricane made flesh, his suit jacket streaked with something dark, his eyes blazing with barely leashed violence. Cisco stood at attention. "Boss!" There was screaming reported from the children's wing. The maid. Martinez didn't let him finish. He was already moving. Martinez kicked the nursery door open with enough force to crack the frame. The scene before him froze his blood into something molten and lethal. Rosa kneeling on the floor, hands slick with crimson, surgical tweezers gleaming in her grip, Tiago trembling, pale, a smear of blood trailing from his ear down his neck. Matteo convulsing behind her, untouched, dying. And on the white cloth beside Rosa, something dark, wet, and utterly wrong. Martinez's mind didn't process miracle. It processed betrayal. He crossed the room in 2 strides, his hand closing around Rosa's throat like a vice. She gasped, the tweezers clattering to the floor as he lifted her halfway off the ground. His face was inches from hers, rage and grief, and 6 years of shattered hope burning in his eyes. "What did you do to my son?" His voice was a razor wrapped in gasoline. Behind him, Cisco and 2 other guards flooded into the room, weapons drawn, barrels trained on Rosa's spine. She couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Her vision darkened at the edges, but she didn't fight him. She didn't beg. She only raised one shaking hand and pointed, not at herself, at Tiago. "Look," she choked out. "Look at your son." Martinez didn't want to look. He wanted to break her. Wanted to feel her windpipe collapse beneath his fingers the way 100 throats had collapsed before hers. But something in her eyes, something fearless and desperate and certain, made him stop. He turned his head. Tiago was staring at him, not the blank, distant stare Martinez had seen every day for 6 years. This was different. The boy's head tracked him, followed the sound of his father's ragged breathing. Martinez's grip on Rosa loosened a fraction. "Tiago?" His voice cracked, barely a whisper. And then, the boy's lips moved, slow, uncertain, like a ghost learning to speak. "Pa?" Martinez's heart stopped. "Pa?" The word was broken, fragile, real. The gun in Cisco's hand wavered. Martinez released Rosa completely. She crumpled to the floor, gasping, but he didn't see her anymore. He saw only his son. His son, who had just spoken his name. Martinez dropped to his knees, his hands hovering over Tiago's face like the boy was made of glass. Dios mío. Tiago, can you hear me? Tiago blinked. Fresh tears spilled down his cheeks. He nodded. Then Mateo screamed. Not silent this time. Audible. A raw, guttural shriek of agony that shattered the moment like a gunshot. The boy arched violently off the floor, both hands clawing at his right ear. Blood pouring freely, now thick, dark, too much. Rosa lunged for him, but Martinez was faster. He scooped Mateo into his arms, his face drained of color. What's happening to him? He roared. Rosa's voice was hoarse but steady. The blockage is rupturing. If I don't remove it now. She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Martinez looked at the bloody tweezers on the floor, then at Rosa, then at his son, convulsing in his arms. Do it, he whispered. Martinez didn't set Mateo down. He held him this convulsing, bleeding piece of his shattered heart and turned to the guards still frozen in the doorway. Out. His voice was barely human. All of you. Now. Cisco hesitated. Boss, if she... I said out. The guards retreated like shadows fleeing dawn. Martinez laid Mateo gently on the carpet, his massive hands impossibly tender as he cradled the boy's head. He looked at Rosa still on her knees, throat bruised, eyes blazing with purpose. Save him. The second extraction was worse. Mateo bled harder. The mass lodged deeper, fused tighter to the canal walls. Rosa's hands moved with terrifying precision, angling, probing, feeling for the edge of something that should not exist. Martinez watched every second. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. When the mass finally came free, Mateo went limp. For 3 eternal seconds, he didn't move. Then his eyes opened, and he gasped a full, shuddering breath as if surfacing from drowning. His head turned toward the sound of his own breathing, then toward his brother's soft crying, then toward his father's ragged exhale. Papa, Mateo whispered. Martinez Rodrigo, the man who'd ordered executions over breakfast, who'd buried rivals in unmarked graves, who'd burned entire operations to ash without flinching, broke. He pulled both boys into his arms, his face buried in their hair, his shoulders shaking with silent, wrecking sobs. For the first time in 6 years, his sons heard him cry. Rosa turned away, giving him the privacy grief demanded. But Martinez's mind, trained by decades of survival in a world built on knives and lies, wouldn't let him rest in the miracle. The questions came fast, cold, lethal. He released the boys, stood slowly, and picked up the 2 extracted masses from the cloth. Identical, manufactured, deliberate. How? He said quietly. Did a dozen world-class surgeons miss this? Rosa met his gaze. They didn't look, or they were told not to. Martinez's jaw tightened. Who places something like this in a child's ear? Someone who wanted them silent, Rosa said. Someone who had access to them at birth. The chemical scent hit him, then faint but unmistakable. He'd smelled it before. In black site interrogations. In cartel torture rooms. Prison-grade sensory tampering. The kind used to disorient hostages. To break prisoners without leaving marks. Military. Intelligence. Black ops. Someone with resources had done this. Someone with reach. Someone close. Martinez's blood turned to ice. The twins weren't born defective, he whispered. They were sabotaged. Rosa nodded. By someone in your house. Martinez turned to the door and barked. Cisco. The guard reappeared instantly. Find the delivery nurse, the one who was in the room when my sons were born. Cisco's face went pale. Boss, she's dead. Martinez's eyes narrowed. When? Last week. Car accident on the coast highway. A pause. Brakes failed. The air in the room became suffocating. Martinez's voice dropped to a whisper. That's not an accident. He looked at Rosa, then at his sons. Someone's been cleaning up witnesses. Martinez spent the next 72 hours becoming a ghost in his own empire. He interrogated lieutenants in soundproof basements, pulled files on every doctor, nurse, and guard who'd been near his sons, contacted black market intel brokers who traded in secrets too dirty for even the cartels. The picture that emerged was horrifying. The technique had a name. Silenciamiento infantil. Child silencing. used in inheritance wars across Latin America and Eastern Europe when rival factions wanted to discredit an heir. A defective child was a weak heir, one that could be challenged, overthrown, eliminated. Martinez's sons weren't supposed to die. They were supposed to be controllable, silent, dependent, malleable. A rival faction had believed the deafness would make Martinez vulnerable, distracted by grief, weakened by desperation, eventually willing to negotiate power in exchange for a cure that would never come. But who? Rosa had become his unexpected asset. She knew things no one else did: village remedies, old-world practices, the kind of knowledge passed down by grandmothers who'd survived wars the history books forgot. She told him about the fishermen, about the poisoned clay, about the coastal smugglers who used similar techniques to incapacitate hostages during ransom exchanges. The fibers? She said, pointing to the extracted masses under Martinez's desk lamp. They're organic, treated cotton, the kind used in surgical implants but older, black market. Martinez leaned forward. How old? 6 years. Maybe 7. His wife had been alive 7 years ago. Pregnant. Vulnerable. Watched. Suspicion coalesced around one name: Esteban Navarro, his late wife's brother. A man who'd always smiled too much. Who'd visited the hospital the day the twins were born. Who'd been in the room when they were delivered. Who'd expressed too much surprise when the deafness was diagnosed. Martinez pulled Esteban's financial records, offshore accounts, payments to a now-defunct medical supply company in Bogotá, wire transfers dated 2 weeks before the twins' birth. The same company that manufactured prison-grade sensory equipment. He sold out his own nephews, Martinez whispered, his voice hollow. Rosa stood beside him, silent. For what? Martinez asked no one. Money? Power? A seat at a table he was never strong enough to earn? Family bleeds the deepest, Rosa said quietly. That's why the cuts never heal. Martinez was halfway to the window, preparing to make the call that would end Esteban's life when the glass exploded. The bullet missed his skull by 2 inches. It punched through the curtain, shattered the decanter on his desk, and buried itself in the mahogany paneling behind him. Martinez hit the floor on instinct, Rosa beside him. Outside, in the distant tree line beyond the estate walls, a muzzle flash blinked once, then vanished. Cisco burst through the door, weapon drawn. Boss sniper. But Martinez was already up, blood trickling from a glass cut on his cheek, eyes burning with something beyond rage. Esteban just made his move. He smiled cold, predatory, final. Now I make mine. The sniper was found 3 hours later in a shipping container at the port. Dead. Cyanide capsule. Bitten through. Professional. Clean. But not clean enough. Martinez's men found a burner phone in the man's jacket. 1 number. Called twice in the past week. The number traced to a private line Martinez hadn't dialed in 4 years. His father's. Martinez stood in the interrogation room, staring at the phone like it was a live grenade. Cisco spoke carefully. Boss. It could be a setup. Someone using his identity to. It's him. Martinez's voice was flat. Dead. He'd known his father was ruthless. Knew he'd built the Rodrigo empire on blood and silence. Knew the old man valued control above everything. Above loyalty. Above love. Above family. But this? Rosa entered quietly, a medical kit in hand. You're bleeding. Martinez touched his cheek absently. The glass cut had dried into a thin red line. Sit, she said. He did. She cleaned the wound in silence, her hands steady, her presence a strange kind of gravity in the chaos. Why would he do it? Martinez asked, not looking at her. Why would my own father sabotage his grandsons? Rosa didn't answer immediately. She pressed a gauze pad to his cheek, her voice low. Because they weren't his grandsons. They were hers. The pieces fell into place like dominoes made of bone. Martinez's wife, Camila, had been from the Ortiz family, a rival bloodline. The marriage was supposed to be a truce, a bridge between empires. But Martinez's father had never trusted the Ortiz blood. He believed Camila would poison his son's mind, that her children would be weapons against the Rodrigo legacy. So he'd done the unthinkable. He ordered the twins silenced at birth. Not killed, killing them would have triggered war. But disabled. Made dependent. Stripped of their agency so that when Camila inevitably died and she had bleeding out on that delivery table, perhaps not as accidentally as Martinez believed, the twins could be raised by him. quiet, obedient, controllable, heirs who would never question, never challenge, never hear dissent. Martinez's father had planned to take them, raise them in silence, mold them into extensions of his will, and Martinez, broken by grief, distracted by desperation, would have let him. He wanted to erase her. Martinez whispered. Erase Camila from my sons completely. Rosa's hand rested briefly on his shoulder. But he didn't. They have her eyes, her heart, and now her voice. Martinez stood slowly, his face carved from stone. The man who feared nothing suddenly looked haunted. There's a code, he said quietly. In our world, you don't touch blood. You don't move against your own father. It's the one line you never cross. Rosa met his gaze. He crossed it first. 6 years ago, Martinez stared at the burner phone. Then he picked it up and dialed. The voice that answered was cold, familiar, and utterly unsurprised. I was wondering when you'd figure it out, mijo. Martinez's hand tightened around the phone until the plastic creaked. I'm coming for you. The abandoned vineyard stood like a graveyard beneath the storm. Rain hammered the earth in sheets, turning dust to mud, drowning the world in static. Lightning split the sky every few seconds, illuminating rows of dead vines twisting like skeletal fingers. Martinez stood at the center, drenched, unarmed, waiting. His father emerged from the shadows, tall, silver-haired, still sharp despite his 70 years. 2 bodyguards flanked him, weapons drawn. You came alone, the old man said, almost disappointed. This isn't war, Martinez replied. This is judgment. His father smiled cold, reptilian. You think you have the right to judge me? I built you. Every drop of blood in your veins runs because I willed it. You poisoned my sons. I saved them. The old man stepped closer, rain streaming down his face. Camila would have turned them soft, made them weak. Silence would have made them obedient kings. Martinez's jaw tightened. They were 6 years old. They couldn't hear their father's voice, couldn't hear the world. And you thought that was mercy? It was control, his father hissed. Something you've always been too sentimental to understand. Martinez took 1 step forward, his voice dropped to a whisper that cut through the storm like a blade. A lion's cubs aren't meant to crawl. The gunshot echoed once. Then nothing but rain. Martinez's father collapsed into the mud, eyes wide, a single hole through his chest. The bodyguards didn't move. They'd been Martinez's men all along. He stood over the body for a long moment, watching the rain wash the blood into the earth. A generational curse ended. When Martinez returned to the mansion, soaked and silent, the twins were waiting in the nursery, laughing. Actually laughing, a sound he'd never heard before. They ran to him, crashing into his legs, their voices high and bright and impossibly alive. Papa, Papa. He dropped to his knees, pulling them close, burying his face in their hair as thunder rolled across the sky. Rosa stood in the doorway, ready to leave, ready to vanish the way maids always did. But Martinez raised his head, and then slowly, deliberately he bowed. The most feared man in 13 countries lowered his head before a woman from a fishing village. His voice cracked. You saved my sons, and you saved me. Rosa's eyes glistened. They were always worth saving, Señor Rodrigo. Outside, thunder crashed like the birth of something new, an empire rebuilt. Not on silence, but on truth. Did this story grip you from beginning to end? If you felt every twist, every betrayal, every heartbreaking moment, smash that like button, and let me know in the comments which chapter hit you the hardest. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another story that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for watching. Now go hug someone you love.